want to pry so much to where they're like, oh, mom, but you also want to be that place for them. Just one quick thing, and then we're going to talk about grieving. Our time is going a lot faster than I thought. I don't know. Be careful for buried emotions. Be looking for buried emotions and kids hiding their feelings. Be careful for guilt. If a kid, sometimes if they're dealing with death, is like, did I do something, or I wish I would have done, I wish I would have reached out more. If they're saying those kind of things like that, it's important for you. Anger, sometimes they may be angry at God. Sometimes they may be angry at that person. Sometimes for leaving them, or angry at that situation, or whoever made that decision. So that way, they may be angry at the governor because he locked us down, or whatever it may be. But look for those emotions. Be careful with like risky behavior. Also, sometimes when kids go through this, they'll if they drive recklessly. They get into fights. Sometimes they get into drugs and whatever. And so just be looking for that. Go, why would you do that? If they did something. Like they're like, hey, I'm gonna just jump off this rail or whatever. Like why would you do that? You could have got hurt. They're trying to process that. They're trying to understand some of that. And the last thing I would think is just to be careful with is be looking for your child for any kind of either passive or active suicidal thoughts. Be careful with that, because in this time they're going to go, well, that person got to escape, or all this stuff is coming out to them. And I just want to give you this one quick thing. If you feel at any point that your child is thinking suicidally, even if it's just like a little bit like, I don't like that comment, one, go to them and ask them, like, what are you feeling? That's kind of a big red flag. But sometimes parents don't know what to do if there's ever kind of any suicide. Like, where do we go to? Who do we talk? Do we talk to the pastor? No. Okay. And not when I say that, don't mean you can't talk to me. Who can help you better? We would love to pray with you about it, but. Talk to your family physician, because what they're recommending is that your family physician then can connect you with the person that can evaluate your child. So I know you're like, well, why would I go to my family physician? Because they're not sick, physically. But if you can make an appointment and you feel like your child is somewhat having some kind of suicidal thoughts, if they're saying things like, I wish I could just take a nap for a long time and never wake up. That's kind of passive. It's a little bit passive, like, and that may be a little bit of red flags there. And also we want you to what that healthcare professional can do is be able to help you and get you connected for the right reason. So not only are we talking about death, but we're talking about grieving as well. And again, we got probably about 5 minutes.
Oh,
we got to end a little bit early tonight.
20.
I know.
Okay. Crash course in grieving. No, you're gonna get this whole package, and I really read it. Like, take some time. You don't have to read it all at once. You can't even get it all in at once. But what is grief? Grief is one of those things that's really hard to pin down and define with any sort of precision, because everyone's looks different. That's true. Grief, one thing I can say is it's not one emotion. Like grief, it's not like, an emotion of happy, sad, grief. That's not it. Grief is a package of emotions, and grief is a process. And everybody's grief can look different. Like,
I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you your 20 minutes. I'm going to go up and do that, and you can close that off. Can that work?
yes. I was really like,
we have our first steps class going on, and I wanted to go greet them real quick, so just don't forget this.
put it in front of me. I'm an out of sight, out of mind human. Anybody else?
Are you guys getting something out of this? Is
Yes,
that something?
yes.
Okay.
Very good.
Very good.
So, when we're thinking about our kids grieving, it's not just the death of someone. It is stuff. It is the lack of events, like we kind of talked about. I'm going to go over a quick list. It could be the loss of a teacher, friends, a stable social group, a scholarship, a pet, the ability to compete in a sport. Because in spring, some sports stopped, right? A vehicle, they lose that because financially, whatever. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons. If they lose their phone, they lose access to video games. Kids can grieve these things. And as an adult, you may say, why would they grieve the loss of their video game? But if it's something they enjoy, it is important to them. And so they can grieve that. Y'all with me on that? They also, there's a grieving something you literally lose, like you had and then you don't have anymore. But then there's also the grieving the loss of the hope of something. Like all of the seniors from 2020 that lost their normal end of year stuff, that lost their prom. Like he said, they're never going to get that prom back. I mean, they could try to recreate it, but it's not going to be what it would have been, right? Or their graduations. Some of them still had graduations, but they were way different than they ever dreamed. Way different than maybe older siblings or they've seen on social media or whatever. It was not what they had in their head. And so grieving the loss of the hope of that event. Like for people that had to alter their weddings. Like we had, church family that happened to. They didn't have the picture of their wedding that they had. They're still married, so hey, that's okay for that. But the loss of the hope of what could have been is still a big thing, and it's something that can be grieved. An example of this that has nothing to do with COVID is that they used here is for a child who like with an estranged parent who has a parent that's not in their life a lot, the hope of what that relationship could have been in their heart or might want to be in their heart. Even I'll say as an adult, not having a relationship that I would like to have had with my father, like none of that didn't go the way I wanted. Every now and then I go through and grieve the loss of having that in my life. I just think I don't have this place. And so a kid, if an adult can feel that, like 25 years later or whatever, no, I'm not that old, but anyways, 18 plus 25 is not my age, but a child can grieve that. And so there's so many things, not to make you feel overwhelmed like, oh my gosh, my child is just grieving all the time, but being aware of if there's been a loss of something, are there signs that show me maybe they're grieving? You with me? Did I throw too much at you right then? He freaked me out with that whole 5-minute thing, and now I'm talking fast. Someone's trying to call me. Like, they gotta know. But like I said, grief is not an emotion. It's a process that involves a lot of emotions. Think of it like a box filled with many emotions that need to be unpacked. If you if you move, let's say, and you got a box full of a whole bunch of random stuff, do you want to just throw it out on the floor? Is that going to do anyone any good? You've got to unpack it. And so you want to deal with it as it comes. And the crazy thing about grief is not everyone's going to experience the steps of grief in the same order. So it's super easy for you to figure out, right? Maybe not. Why are we so bad at dealing with grieving? That's a question, a headline on this page.
We don't want to deal with it.
We don't want to deal with it. That's a good, honest answer. Like, I think also as a parent, you don't want to believe your child is hurting, right? Like, you want them good. I mean, we do. But a lot of it is when we are in normal life, which I know we're all sick of hearing those terms, but back in normal life, we were doing our routine, right? Work, or let's see, we sleep, we get up, breakfast, we get out the door, we go do our things, school, work, whatever. We have activities afterwards. We go to church on the days at church. We go home, we eat dinner if we haven't, we get them ready for bed, we go to sleep, we get up, we do it all over again. And it is a very patterned cycle. On the weekends, maybe we have sports, fun, rest, whatever, but we have a cycle, right? And then when something crazy happens in our life and grief is thrown in, it's like a bomb. That's how they really describe it. It's like it messes up our flow, because now where we were on this really functioning thing overall, I mean, none of us are perfect and none of us are robots, but we had life moving. Now we're dealing with major emotions like anger, shock, frustration, indignation. Those are all normal signs of grieving. So when you throw shock from something that you just lost into your world, it's hard to keep your wheels moving as much. With me still? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay. But ultimately, and I think we all know this, but avoiding grief for either ourselves or our kids, it doesn't work. We've got to help ourselves or them through it. Grief will not go away on its own. And one thing that I read and learned is that grief can last for days, weeks, months, years, maybe your whole life, depending on what it is and you. Like, there's no handout I can tell you and say, this is the formula, how you're going to see your child go through it. You'll get to that end equation. Like, all of you the same. Like, it's just not. Because God didn't make us all the same, right? So we all react to things, including loss, differently. And so, you know, you may be like, well, it's just too overwhelming to try to figure out. Like, I'm just going to go into that avoidance and keep the, like, the circle going. But we can't stuff it. Pastor Joy always used to say, you can't stuff your emotions. That's not good. And if we stuff our grief, that's even worse than stuffing just a regular emotion. But another thing about grief is it can be seasonal, cyclical, or even both. That means it can come with a season, it can come in cycles, or it can do both. It can be triggered unexpectedly by memories, events, scents, activities, images, etc. Probably why there are still moments when I, for a little bit, grieve the lack of a dad in my life. Just being honest, like, makes sense. Probably like when I go to a wedding and I think about like the dad walking the daughter down the aisle, and I think about how my daughter will have that, but I didn't have that. Like, I'm just being real. It's not like poor me, but like those kind of moments when we think about things that our kids walk through, those kind of things can trigger that. And it's good if you have a spiritual awareness and you're listening to the Holy Spirit so you can help your kid through those kind of things. You with me? Yes? Okay. I really am trying to be fast. But the thing is that like something like that, like a scent, a smell, a memory, an event triggering something, it's normal. It doesn't mean that anything abnormal in grief is happening. So if a smell of an ice cream cone triggers like grieving, you know, Saturdays where you used to go and have all the fun at Six Flags or something, I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but if the scent of ice cream was to trigger a grief of that, that's normal. Your kid's not losing their mind. So that makes you feel better, right? You know, culture talks to our kids about grieving, whether we realize it or not. A good example of how our culture tends to grieve big losses, especially usually concerning losing people, is candlelight vigils. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that's a way that our culture, our society has found as a group to grieve losses of people. They'll come together for these kind of events. And so it's good in that culture does at least acknowledge we've got to grieve together. But as parents, going to a candlelight vigil would not be the end all be all of grieving, right? Any questions? You good? I'm going too fast? I'm still in a little bit of fast mode, so I'm trying to calm down. You know, grief can be painful and it can make us wonder and ask questions like, how can I feel better? How can I be happy again? We can't focus on that. We've just got to unpack it as it comes, not like trying to rush it and get to the happy part. And I think our culture teaches kids that quickness is good, right? You want something, like, let's go get it now. We got microwaves, those are great, but we get to have our, you know, pot pie heated up in minutes instead of like 50 minutes, right? But grieving's not gonna, there's no microwave for grief, is what I'm trying to say. And so the nowness of our culture is very counter to how we actually get through a grieving process. Whether we're like we said, grieving the loss of a family member that passed away, that died, as he said, being clear, or if we're grieving what could have been, if we're grieving our school year and what starting middle school is supposed to look like. I'm grieving that for my daughter because I'm like, she was supposed to start and ride a bus and her friends are going with her and now it's all online. There's no quick fix to that. But our culture tells our kids they don't need to grieve and that all they need to do is chase whatever makes them happy in the moment to get a quick fix. And we just need to help them know that's not reality for her. It's not the way God made us. He made us complicated and emotional, and we got to deal with it, right? He made us so complicated, but we're not robots, and I'm thankful for that. And you talked about how you guys have 2 kids showing different thoughts and feelings on it. And it says 3 different kids are going to have 3 different reactions through grieving. They're going to look completely different. And so you just got to know your kid and know, are they really outwardly expressed? Do they hold things more in? We have one of each in our house. And I won't say who's who. Pretty sure Brittany knows. She's their auntie. But there's one, like last night, and it wasn't, I guess you could call it grieving, but she was upset about clothing and how growing up changes clothing. That's all I'm going to say for her personal. But she was upset about that, but I had to dig it out because she was not telling me. The other one, she just lets it all hang out. And you got to know your kids. And I think we know our kids pretty well usually. We know how God made them, even if we don't understand them, right? Okay. It gives an analogy at some point about if we teach our kids about grief or if we don't. Like if we help them walk through things and we talk about like grieving losses, or if we never do. For those of you whose kids are old enough to either have started learning to drive or they're drivers now, can you imagine if you gave them the keys to your car and said go, but you never taught them a thing? And I don't mean like they went to driver school at school. I mean nobody taught them anything and you said here you go. Do you think your car would come back in the way you want it? Or would they come back safe? No. And Access uses that analogy in talking about teaching your kids about how to grieve things that happen, losses in life. I talked a few Wednesdays ago about we all have losses. Some of us we have different levels of losses. We're going to have different timings of losses, but there's losses. And if we don't teach them how to grieve those effectively, it's like giving them keys to a car but not teaching them how to handle it, because they got all those emotions in them, right? God made us that way. He didn't make us like with no brain and no emotions. They've got it in them. But if we don't teach them what to do with those, then that's, no, we don't want to go there, right? Especially with girls. I don't know about boys. I haven't raised a boy in a low age. I've only got the upper age that I'm going. He's got his emotions too. Anyways, my poor kids, I just talk about them all the time. We got just a couple more minutes, but bringing it back biblically, when we read the Bible from cover to cover, wherever you are, it's not like social media. It doesn't make it glossy and beautiful, right? Like it tells us the nitty gritty, and that there were losses and there were hard things. And I mean, if you just read some Psalms where David is like, he wails to the Lord. He has sorrow. He puts it out there to God. Like we get to see that. The Bible does not paint a pretty picture of there will be no sorrow. Like it's real, and it tells us that there's always been sorrow since the garden. So sorry, I need water. There's been things to grieve. But the beauty of that is that if we have to grieve through things, if we walk through these seasons, and it's not eternal, we can see that it's biblical and we're okay, and that we can get through it with God. It gives us the hope. It doesn't just show us the sorrow and no hope. There is hope. He is a redeemer. Last thing I'll say, I'm going to do 2 last things, okay? I always have a last thing. But the 5 grieving stages are denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. And you may hit denial first, you may hit anger first. It's hard to say. Usually don't hit acceptance first. That's the goal. Acceptance is, okay, like I'm going to get through this even though I've incurred this loss. And there's, like we talked about, there's the big stuff of grieving, losing people. Then there's the also big but not as big of losing experiences, hope of dreams of things that were going to happen. On our vacation, I didn't post a lot of pictures because it was mostly good. But our first day in this condo right on the water, never in my life have I stayed. I've been blocks from the water. I've been able to walk to water, but I've never been on the water. It was a big deal to me that God gave us this like amazing deal. And we were there. First day, we hadn't even been there like an hour. And Lacey and Lewis were out swimming, and it was the bay, and it was shallow, and I was so excited because I was like, even though I don't have tiny kids, like, I don't have to worry about waves taking them out. Like, I can just relax, and they're going to play in the water, and it's going to be so great all week. First 10 minutes they're in the water. Me and Layla, we weren't in there yet because it was kind of cold. It was in the evening, and I wasn't ready to be cold in the water. And I just hear my youngest child screaming to the top of her lungs. And he was right there by her, but he was snorkeling. And she was right there by him. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy. Well, what we figured out is she was stung by a jellyfish. And what we figured out once we got her inside was like all over. It wasn't just one spot. It was like all over. And she's not a big human. And she was just freaking out. There's been one other experience in my life where, as a mother, I felt completely unprepared. And it was a little more severe. She couldn't breathe at that other time. But this, I felt completely unprepared. I had no idea how to treat jellyfish sting. And anyways, Google, family and friends, and Teledoc. We got it figured out. She was okay. Got to find out Lewis was stung more than one spot, but he was in like this dad adrenaline and didn't even notice it for like an hour. I was like, I'm married to a beast. Like, he didn't even know. Like, you're amazing. I would have been wailing away with Lacey. But, so I'm like, okay, well, we got jellyfish in the water. I started doing research. Found out there's a jellyfish swarm in the area that happens like twice a year. It happened to be our week of vacation. So Lacey was not going in that water. Layla was not going in that water. So 2 days later, after we had done like a pool day and stuff, we go to Orange Beach. It's like 25 minutes away. It's in Alabama. We're staying in Florida. We should be good, right? So we go. We fought to put up our little tent. And I'm telling you some details. I'm a woman. That's what we do. We get there. I sit down finally to drink my coffee that I had not drank yet. And here comes Layla, very calmly. She's my drama child usually. Very calmly, she's like, I think I've been stung. Come to find out, she was stung by the jellyfish. It was like hurting her like 7 out of 10. The only way I knew to treat it at this point was hot water, which I didn't have access to at Orange Beach, at a public beach. So we pack up our stuff and go back to the house to like get her all treated and calmed and everything. And on the way back, I had some grieving and I had some questions. This is the point. The water that I was so excited about where we were staying, my children won't get in, and I was a little leery. The beach that I thought they won't get in. We're here for a week, God. Don't you know we need a break? Don't you know? Like, I was just grieving all of my hopes and my dreams, and I hit anger first, let's just be honest. And they never swim in that bay, but we did kayak in it, because there were kayaks there. And the last day, Layla did get back in the ocean, and she did boogie board her heart out. Over the course of those days, I don't even know if I went through all of them, but I came to accept the fact that God is the redeemer of all circumstances. Life is never perfect, even vacation, though as Americans we want it to be because we just need a little break from life. It's never going to be perfect. And you may even have to grieve on your vacation a little bit, but I saw God as my redeemer so many times. We didn't have a horrible trip. We had some crazy moments. We didn't have to go to the doctor. We didn't have to go to the ER. We didn't have to do extreme things. God redeemed it. And so if he can redeem my little vacation that, was just a blip on the pulse of my life, he can redeem all the things. And I know there's much bigger things that we've all lost, even this year, than swimming, right? But he cares about the details, and he cares about the big stuff. And so my point is we will grieve, our kids will grieve, but he's the redeemer. And so be encouraged. We serve redeeming Lord. He will save us. Y'all with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Amen. Well, I'm excited that, not to grieve, but I'm excited to just share these resources with you guys, because it is good to be armored up as a parent and know that you're not going to in a moment feel like you're helpless and you don't know how to help your child, because that's not fun. Anybody have that moment before? Besides me? Yeah. Okay. I think it's part of parenting, but if we can help armor you with information, I'm excited about that. So I'm going to stop this recording and I'm going to give you your handouts. And I'm 8 minutes over, so I'm sorry.